Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So, as I mentioned yesterday, let me get you turned a little bit. Yeah, because we're still procrastinating painting the rest of that part of the ceiling. Welcome back. As you know, yesterday we started reading a chapter a day for the month of March, or 20 minutes, which for me is about a chapter if I speak it out loud. Again, I'm feeling a lot better today, so I'm not as congested, luckily, but I still am slightly short of breath, and my wife is bringing my cup because I need to moisten everything before I try to read. But part 2 of chapter 1 is still trying to upload as I film this. My Wi-Fi is extremely slow, and the data on my phone is being extremely slow as well, which is really odd. I think it's because it's been raining on and off here the past couple of days. So my surface is a little shoddy. Oh, look here. Here she is. She's back. Thank you.
You're welcome.
She sits in here and listens to me read. So she's feeling like she's reading the book with me. So again, we are reading The Bine Witch by Rin Chupeco. This book right here. We're in chapter 2. We start chapter 2 today. And it starts on page 11 and ends on page 20. These chapters are actually kind of fairly short. I say that. Yeah. They're actually kind of like really short. So I may read 2 chapters today. Who knows? She just dumped her cup because she decided to lay down. Are you going to clean it up?
Yep, sure am.
Yep.
Lucky there was not a lot in there. That's true, we filled up my drink too.
It's a good thing you didn't.
Yeah.
Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and start chapter 2 while she is cleaning up her mess that she had dumped on our floor. So, never a dull moment. Are you ready?
Somebody needs to edit that out.
No, dear. No hiding. Like, we don't edit out, like.
We can't tell the world that your wife is a client.
Oh, they should already know that. Alright. Chapter 2. She was a beautiful woman. Her long hair billowed out behind her like a cloak of sun-kissed yellow, and her eyes were dark caves from where blue gems glinted. She was young, and in the way a woman of 60 might carefully tuck away the years around her to appear 20. She looked nothing like a bone witch ought to look. She was soft and willowy and comely, and everyone in Knight's Cross was afraid of her. My mother told me later of the fear the lady inspired when she first rode into Knight's Cross. Her horse was a beautiful... palmino with a glossy chestnut mane, and the woman herself wore a robe of varying blues and dark greens, as if to mimic the colors of the ocean. Silvery fish adorned the edges of her dress, swimming into view and back out again whenever her skirts rustled. She wore a waist wrap of pale lavender with an embroidered pattern of pearls. Gemstones attached to long pins were worn into her golden hair, and they glistened each time she moved her head. On a chain around her neck, a heart's glass swung. It had metal works of hammered gold and tiny jewels, the surface glossy, mirrored in the silver sharp. It was also empty. Crone, muttered the bravest in the crowd. Crow, But even the most courageous of the lot melted away at her approach, or were led away by those with better sense. The villagers knew she was the worst of witches, a demon in woman's skin, but the king had declared otherwise. And whatever their breed of cowardice, they were neither traitors nor fools. She arrived within 2 days of the attempted funeral, though the news had not yet traveled to Merkwick, the nearest township 15 leagues to the east. She strode down the path leading into the square without a word, villagers trailing behind her despite themselves. She marched straight into my home, where my family had shut Fox up in a forge, away from the terrified mob. "Milady," she said to Lilac, "I would be grateful if you could calm the people gathered outside. It wouldn't do to have your family's livelihood burned for so poor an excuse." Next she turned to Rose. "And might I ask you, milady, for a treatment of wart root and farrow, lavender oil, and bath water?" Rose and Lilac, reasonable, respectable witches, by comparison to the frightful woman and accused Bone Witch, hurried to do as she commanded. "Where is she?" was her next question, and my father showed her the room I shared with my sisters. She found me curled up on my small bed, forehead burning from the strain of the magic. I was in no condition to remember what happened, but my mother told me everything. The witch bathed my face and chest with bitter herbs and sweet water. She measured sage and fallow tree in a bowl and spooned small doses of the concoction into my mouth. When evening came, the sky with tiny twinkling stars, my fever had broke, the furnace in my mind reducing to kindling. I slept undisturbed until dawn the next day, while the witch stood guard. The sickness was gone when I awoke, and in its place was the woman, sleeping in a chair at the foot of the bed. I rose to the sitting position and stared at my visitor. A soft haze surrounded her, a subdued light both familiar and frightening. "My dead father was my first summon," the lovely woman said without opening her eyes. "I don't know what came over me, I'm sure. I was his daughter, but he thought I fared better of his property. Denied me even the smallest freedoms, and imprisoned me in petticoats and sewing lessons. Had he lived longer, he would have confined me to a convent, or deeded me over a wealthy merchant to wed. Perhaps I did it to show him there was more to me than someone else's dowry. He was not as imposing dead as he was alive, though, and he was most unwilling, so I sent him back quickly. Sick as a dog for 4 days from my trouble, you seem to have fared better, with only 2 nights' worth of illness. My name is Michaela. You might have heard of me. 6 months ago, a visiting merchant told my father of a davia that terrorized the town of Larthbrook, 90 leagues away. A strange woman they called Michaela of the Hollows had killed it, he said. Surely no one else in Odalia had heart so pale or skin so light. I trembled. Yes, they call you the Bone Witch. Your parents tell me you're quite the precocious child. The woman smiled, 2 rows of pearly whites against scarlet lips. That's not the worst they call me, and that will not be the worst they will call you. Bone witches were not a respectable trade. They said bone witches gave sleeping sicknesses to innocent princesses with the prick of a finger, and they said bone witches ate the hearts of children who strayed too far into forest. Bone witches did not truly serve the 8 kingdoms as they claim, because they dabbled in the dark ruins as like the false prince and his faceless followers. Bone witches raised armies from the dead. Bone witches could raise Devea, like the one that had killed Fox. My heart beat faster, my chest painfully tight. Will you send my brother back? No. The witch traced an obscured pattern in the air. That is not how this works. He is your creation, not mine. Your brother did not know what he asked, and you did not know when you answered. But unlike my father, I suspect Pax Pavelli was where you both want him to be. You can summon the dead, and they can come at first, because they are creatures curious of the life they once tasted and long to savor again. But you cannot bind dead folk without their consent, and you cannot make them stay. That is the first rule of the dark. There are only two types of people you cannot raise from the dead: those with silver heart glasses like ours, and those who are not willing. And your brother is very willing. I felt sick all over again. I did not want to be a bone witch. I could not be a bone witch. Lilac had promised me gems and dresses and a handsome prince. And if I don't want to? The lady's bright eyes looked back at me, knowing. Do you know what it is considered in poor taste to lie to the one who saved your life? I averted my gaze because she was right. I did not want that woman's presence in my room, tainting the air with the truth I had not deserved to hear. I did not want to think about my brother torn between the living and the dead by my own hand, but I had wielded the magic, and I had liked its flavor. Even then, my fingers itched to trace the exquisite rune in the air again, to sample it with my mind. The spell's aftertaste still lingered in my mouth, like sweet peaches, like silken honey that had burst underneath my tongue and ran smoothly down my throat. The dark are greedy runes. Draw them once, and they will ruin you for any other magic. The dark are also jealous runes. We cannot channel fire and water and earth and wood runes any more than we can attack with the shadows on the walls. But most importantly, the dark are seductive runes that steal into your head and make free with your thoughts when you least anticipate them, and for that you will require watching. I don't need watching, I said out of desire to be stubborn. The witch guffawed, a strange sound from one who looked so elegant. Yes, child, you need no watching, and I should have stayed in my ashkaka in Akio and let the dark sup at the waist of your bones. And then your family would have 2 funerals instead of 1, she sighed. We have little choice, you and I. It is the law. If you do not serve the kingdoms, then the faceless shall seek you out. Which path would you prefer, bone witch or traitor? I took a long, shuddering breath. It was true. I owed her my life, if not yet my trust. What's going to happen next? We'll leave for Anako as soon as you are able. I froze. I had never left my village, much less traveled to Neve, Odala's capital. I knew that Ankyo was even further than that, across Odala's borders and into the kingdom of Coin. Michaela of the Hollow smiled at my stricken face. There are many things that I need to teach you, T, and it would inconvenience me to have the villagers fear running underfoot when it was most inappropriate. Your family may visit if you wish them to. It is a long journey, but if your studies go well, we can arrange to have their expenses paid for by our house, and we shall take your brother with us. Will you make him better? Lady Michaela turned to me, and only did I see how terribly old the woman was. Not old from the patches of years, but from seeing too much of what most would rather see little of. You can't make the better of the dead, sweet child, she said, though I reckon death could make the better of us. Fox showed no inclination to eat anyone once the doors were unbarred, though food could have improved his features. He was too ashen, his eyes red-rimmed, but he stood obedient while Lady Michaela made her inspections. A crowd still gathered as news of my condition had spread. Miss Dury stood to one side and gave me the evil eye, and when the people muttered and whispered, they looked at me the same way they looked at the Bone Witch. You're in better shape than most I've seen. She reached out and smoothed Fox's hair, and my mother's hand twitched in response. All your fingers and toes and the wits still in your head. Do you feel at ease in this skin? I am not uncomfortable, Fox replied. I am sorry, the lady said, this time to my parents. Tea will not be safe here, not from the villagers' prejudice, which can be rectified. Your daughter must have training, or the dark will chew holes into her heart, eat her from the inside out, until she shall be more husk than the dead we trade in. Do you want to do this, T? Father asked, like he believed I still had a choice. I did not want to, but Fox was now my responsibility, the way I had been in Fox's in those days before he went to war. I'm going to protect my brother, I said slowly, trying out the words to see how they sounded. My brother smiled at my gumption, though it did not quite reach his eyes. We must go soon, the Bone Witch said, but before we do, I owe you one more thing at least. We will not have a chance to enjoy your heart's rune day, so I hope this is some consolation. She held out to me the most beautiful heart glass I had ever seen, gold spun into intricate leaves winding through the glass on all sides. Small stones of ruby and beryl balanced out its paleness. Shivering, I allowed my sister Lilac to clasp it around my neck. Lady Michaela of the Hollows drew a shape in the air, and I felt nothing more than a small tug at my chest as the Bone Witch coaxed my heart out and into the glass. In the early sunless dawn it shone, not pink and red as my parents and siblings, or even purple like my witch sisters, but a dazzling silver white. She prepared our meal with simple tools in rudimary fashion: a metal pan over a small fire, oyster shells for spoons, coconut husk for bowls. Mine was a feast worth more than I was: a leg of turkey stuffed with sage and thyme and dripping in gravy, freshly baked bread as if it's just from the ovens, and fish swimming in a tangy sauce made from the chopped apples and glazed lemons. There was wine of the finest vintage from the Thestra's framed vineyards. I came prepared, she said, smiling at my astonishment. A merchant from a nearby town supplies my needs and asks no questions. In many places, money speaks louder than one's belief. Did you think I would come here to forge for scraps when I have other skills at my disposal? In contrast,